When I was 5 years old, I spent the night at my grandmother's apartment and had one of the strangest, most vivid dreams of my life. Even now, many of the details are still burned into my memory. I was sleeping in the exact same room where the dream took place. Right in the middle of the living room stood a large oval table. That was where our family usually celebrated holidays and hosted guests. But in my dream, that very table had turned into something unbelievable. And along the streets, small people with oversized heads rushed around, busy with their lives. They ran back and forth everywhere, but none of them ever jumped off the table. The dream was incredibly bright and colorful. At first, I just walked around the table, staring at the strange little world in amazement. The tiny people didn't hide from me, though they watched me cautiously. But as a kid, I was a bit of a troublemaker, so naturally, even in a dream, I couldn't behave for long. I started chasing the little people around for fun, and before long, I was smashing their tiny houses and wrecking their miniature streets. I remember laughing the whole time. Then, right in the middle of all that chaos, the door of one of the little houses opened. Out stepped a girl, or maybe a young woman. She was the same tiny size as the others, but unbelievably beautiful, at least to my 5-year-old eyes, and I instantly fell in love with her. She stood in the middle of the half-destroyed little city and looked up at me. Instead of yelling or blaming me, she calmly asked me to stop destroying everything. Her voice was soft and gentle, almost pleading with me to show a little mercy. Her voice, her face, everything about her was so delicate that I immediately stopped. Not only that, I even started trying to rebuild some of the tiny houses I had destroyed. While I worked, we talked, and the more she spoke, the more I fell for her voice, and for that small, perfectly shaped, oval face. I don't remember every detail of the dream now, but I do remember that by the end of it, I was so deeply in love with that tiny girl that it almost made me cry. I felt warm and happy in a way I'd never felt before. But all good things come to an end. A few steps she turned back and said, "Don't forget me." And then I woke up. The dream affected me so deeply that I couldn't stop thinking about it for days. I kept drawing the little city on the table and the beautiful tiny girl in my sketchbooks. Some of those drawings might still exist somewhere among old papers from my childhood. Secretly, I hoped the dream would come back, but it never did, until 3 years later. I was in 2nd grade when my family moved to Mongolia because of my father's work assignment. We settled in a town called Kara, and I started attending the local Russian school. On the very first school assembly, something happened that shocked me. Among the rows of students standing in formation, one of the older girls stepped forward to report to the teachers. And suddenly, I saw her. Of course, she wasn't tiny anymore. She was wearing a red pioneer scarf. I remember a wave of heat rushing through my entire body. I almost collapsed right there in the line. Of course, she wasn't tiny anymore. She was a 5th grader, almost a head taller than me. But her face, her hairstyle, even now I can describe it properly. A long bob haircut, but the face was identical to the girl from my dream. The same perfect oval shape, slightly tan skin, and deep, thoughtful eyes that gave me chills every time she looked at me. Her name turned out to be completely ordinary, Zhenya. For about a week I didn't dare approach her. I just admired her from a distance, stunned by this strange twist of fate. To me, a second grader, she seemed very grown up. But one day after school, she made the first move. I walked out onto the school steps and immediately saw her standing below. For some reason, she looked up at me at the exact same moment. I got embarrassed and tried to walk past, but she stopped me. "Hello, boy. My name is Shenya." "Hi, I'm Vova." We started talking. Apparently, she had noticed me staring at her for several days and decided to make things easier for me. We walked home together. Our paths were the same for about 10 minutes before she had to turn off in another direction. But those first 10 minutes were enough for me to tell her all kinds of stories and make her interested in my very modest personality. Shenya mostly listened quietly, occasionally glancing at me with those deep eyes. Yes, those were the same eyes from the dream. I couldn't believe something like that could happen in real life. For some reason, I never told anyone about the dream that had come true. Not my friends, not even Shenya herself. We often walked home from school together after that, but we rarely spent time outside of those walks. She lived far away, and my parents didn't let a second grader wander around too much. After all, it was a foreign country, and back then Mongolia could be a rough place. There were packs of stray dogs, street troublemakers, and all kinds of dangers. So our time together was limited. But for me, those 10 minutes were everything. Sometimes I would wait after school, just so we could walk that short distance together. This went on until the end of May. Then one day, after I walked her home, she suddenly said quietly, "We're leaving the day after tomorrow. For good." She looked at me with those same sad eyes. Just like the first time I saw her, a wave of heat rushed through my body. I tried my best to hide how much the news hurt, but I could tell she understood everything. Our goodbye was simple. No dramatic hugs or kisses. Words I had once heard in my dream. "Don't forget me." I waved goodbye like I was under some kind of spell and slowly walked home. We never exchanged addresses or phone numbers. Back then, kids rarely did that anyway, especially when families moved away. I never saw Shenya again. Later in life, I had several more dreams about that tiny city on my grandmother's table. Every time, I searched desperately among the little people with big heads, hoping to see her face again. But I never did. Still, just like she asked, I never forgot her.